Hey guys, it's Tony. Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a continuation of my series I'm doing on those first players to integrate each team. This is the first team I'm doing a three-part series on, the Cincinnati Reds. I'll do some shout-outs when I turn the camera around to my Reds fans out there on YouTube. But this one's going to highlight early Cuban baseball pioneers on the Reds, which prior to joining YouTube and watching some videos and doing research, didn't really know anything about. And so through that process, I want to continue diving into not just the first black players typically noted to integrate each team, but also talk about Latin American players, from South America, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Mexico, who also made their debuts in some cases before Jackie Robinson, and all their stories are worth telling, admiring, and thinking about too. So this is going to be the third Reds episode. We'll talk about four players, show some cards I've picked up of those players, talk about their stories. All the things I'm going to talk about are from various articles I'm linking to in the description, SABR articles, other articles about the players others have wrote. So this is not my doing, kind of taking data from different places, putting it together here, and hopefully it comes out okay. So we'll turn the camera around, talk about these four players, and I will see you then. Stay tuned. All right, I am back, and you're going to notice a new stand, or a book that the stand is on. This book is called Shades of Glory, the Negro Leagues and the Story of African American Baseball. Now, we won't talk about a lot of the players in this book today, but in future videos I'm doing in my series, I want to refer back to this book. I think it's going to be a really good source of some knowledge, comparing notes on things I'm finding. But this also did talk about two of the four players we'll talk about today on this Cincinnati Reds video, highlighting early Cuban ball players for that team. So I want to keep that here. I'm about halfway through the book. Definitely recommend you picking it up. Really great history, interesting player bios, and just it's been a good read for me so far. So I will keep the stand here. But again, I did find most of this information on SABR related articles. Those articles will be linked in the description. Check those out for sure. There's so much in there I couldn't squeeze into this video, so check those out. Got to shout out again the Reds fans. I'm probably gonna miss a few, I apologize, but Rob Cash Cards, Dave at Peacemaker Cards, Trevor Blue Collar Cards, and Orlando. Orlando at A Collector's Dream. I think I heard about some of these players in one of his videos, highlighting early cards and early cards of early Cuban baseball players. So I'll tag him as well. And I always tag my friend Vintage Dave T. He and I have some of the same collecting interests in terms of early players to integrate and play for each team. So always tag Dave too. So hope you guys enjoy the video. But let me talk about a couple things early on, and we'll get into the cards. So as a lot of you know, April 15th, 1947, Jackie Robinson of the Brooklyn Dodgers becomes the first black American to play baseball in the major leagues. And it's often the first image that comes to mind when people think about the color line. Now, one author I'm reading proposes that Jackie Robinson, and I linked to the articles in the description too. One author, proposes to say that Jackie Robinson playing in the major leagues was not the beginning of integration in baseball, but just another step in the evolution of racial integration that began decades earlier, with baseball being introduced to Cuba, and Cuban ball players making their way to the U.S. and making their way to Major League Baseball teams in the early 1900s. Now this is where a lot of this stuff I had no idea about, so I've really enjoyed learning this. Esteban Bayan, and I'll show a picture of him side by side probably too, is believed to be the first Cuban-born player to ever play professional baseball in the early 1870s. Right around the time the Reds became the first openly all-professional baseball team. It would be many years later, after Esteban, before Cubans began coming more frequently to the majors. But over time, Major League Baseball teams decided that playing exhibition games in Cuba, which had warmer weather in the spring, would help build their brands abroad while also giving them a warm climate in which to prepare for the upcoming season. And some Cuban baseball clubs also made their way to the U.S. in the early 1900s to play against U.S. teams, American teams. Did not know that, but found that out in the book I'm highlighting right now. So in the Reds specifically, in 1908, the Reds toured Cuba. Go back to my notes, toured Cuba and encountered two players who would eventually make appearances on their team and become early Cuban players in the majors. These players were Rafael Almeida and Armando Marsans. Other stars played with them as well, but we'll focus on these two for this first part of the video. Now I want to show these players together, but also talk about them individually as well. So the first player I mentioned was Armando Marsans. This is his 1912 T207 Recruit Little Cigars card. Showed this on our prior video. Got this a few months ago and just loved the pose on this. Love the name, and just the pose. He's mid-throw, his glove on his hand, his right foot's kind of up in the air like he's throwing to first base from the infield or something. I just love that. And for me, this was gotten at a great price because it had evidence of trimming, which doesn't bother me at all. There's creasing, but man, that image is just something I love. So that is Marsans. This is the back. You can see the Recruit Little Cigars at the bottom. And again, it talks about here how it talks about Rafael Almeida too, his teammate, who joined Cincinnati in 1911. He's the son of a wealthy resident of Havana, comes from an old Spanish family, which I'll talk about later. That some of these words and phrases are used to kind of just saying it frankly, make him appeal a bit more non-ethnic in what they're trying to describe him as, where he came from, his background, ethnicity, cultural, things like that, I think. Learned to play the game in Cuba, came to the U.S. in 1910, was on a team in Connecticut, was sold to the Reds. He's a splendid fielder and has a great throwing arm. So love the stats. Think about this, 115 years old, and someone researched all that to put that on the back of that card. So that is Armando Marsans. We'll talk about him separately in just a few minutes. Like I said, also Rafael Almeida. And I don't remember if I've shown this card already. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But this is a pickup from May, so I guess I'll do this in my May video too, when you see that video. This is also a 1912 T207, I believe. There's no ad on the back necessarily, but you can see it talks about Mr. Almeida. Senor Rafael Almeida is one of the first two Cubans to operate in the big leagues. Almeida is considered the strongest hitter ever developed in Cuba. Pretty great praise right there. He is of Portuguese descent and first came to this country as a member of the Connecticut team, same as Marsans. Sold to Cincinnati and played there in 1911. Talking about his failure to report in 1912. But he's playing third base, a fine third base, and hitting the ball hard in the Southern League. So love these backgrounds, love the write-ups on the back. That's the front of his card. Again, very similar to Marsans, but look at that red. Look at his cap. That dark red maroon just really sticks out, and the buttoned up collar there is pretty cool as well. So got this off of a Facebook group, and love to have these two together for this video and in my collection. So we'll put them aside for right now. Let me finish going through some background notes I found. So like I said, the Reds went to Cuba, warmer climate, trained ready for the season, and found these two players. They played against them. Now in 1911, 3 years after 1908, the Reds team ownership looked more seriously at bringing Marsans and Almeida to the team and launched a PR campaign to convince fans this was a good move. One of the SABR articles I'm linking to, like I alluded to just a few minutes ago, kind of appears to imply they were trying to do a PR campaign to show that they were, not as ethnic, maybe a bit, white, just to say it kind of crudely, to more assimilate and fit in with the Major League Baseball players at the time, and that would hopefully win over fans. But that was the time they lived in, 1911. So this PR campaign was going on, and on June 28th, 1911, the Reds purchased the contracts of both these two players, and 1 week later on Independence Day, July 4th, 1911. So July 4th, 1911, they both made their debut in the same game. So I'll show those cards together right here too. It was game one of a doubleheader in Chicago against the Cubs. Marsans got into the game and played right field. Almeida also played in game one. And I found a reference in this article I'm going to link to that they were mentioned in the Cincinnati Enquirer after that first game. And the Enquirer said, let me go down here what it said, they appear to be very fast on the bases, and equipped with strong throwing arms. So that was their write-up the next day in the paper. So let's focus on each player again and talk a bit about them as a person, as a player, and kind of their pre and post playing days career. So here is Armando Marsans again. And again, I think it was Orlando, a Collector's Dream video I watched a while ago that talked about these players. Again, I'd love to have his comment, and I'm sure he could add a lot more color than I'm adding right now, but shout out to him a second time for introducing me through his great videos to these players too. Armando was born in Matanzas, Cuba, played outfield and first base over 655 games between 1911 and 1918. Played with the Reds, the St. Louis Terriers of the Federal League, St. Louis Browns, and the Yankees. Now in his first full season of 1912, Marsans had a .317 batting average. That's pretty good, first full season, and stole 35 bases. Both were in the National League's top 10. He was known for great defense and stretching for extra bases on the base path. Now, the book I'm putting these on right here has a small write-up about Marsans, very, very tiny reference to something. And it refers to the fact that in Cuba, they refer to him as the Cuban answer to Ty Cobb. Now, I don't know who said that, didn't say who said that, how accurate that may have been, but the Cuban answer to Ty Cobb. So I thought that was pretty cool to share with you all as well. He was impacted by the legal battles associated with the Federal League in the 1914-1915 time frame. He lost playing time due to some of those battles and suffered an injury with the Yankees later, which ultimately shortened his career and left him with only 655 games played. In 1939, Armando was one of the first 10 men inducted into the Cuban Baseball Hall of Fame. So very exciting there, and cool to be one of those first 10 players inducted. So we'll go back to Rafael Almeida. We'll put his card right here. Born in Havana, Cuba, and played several years with Marsans in the Cuban Winter League, prior to them both making their debut with the Reds. He wasn't quite a prolific hitter at third base, but caught the eye of the Reds and played 1911 to 1913, so much shorter than Marsans, all with Cincinnati. During his debut year, a local reporter implied that Almeida took one for the team, quote unquote, when he intentionally seemed to get hit by a pitch with the bases loaded to drive in a run. He was referred to in the paper for that, so interesting stuff there. In 1912 and 13, he was up and down between the majors and minors and played outfield and some infield too. He ended his career only with 102 Major League Baseball games played with the Reds over 3 seasons. He did play many years in various major and minor leagues in the U.S. and Cuba, and like Armando Marsans, was inducted into the Cuban Baseball Hall of Fame in 1939 as one of their first 10 inductees. So very exciting for that, and again, love to do the research and know more about these two players and how their paths collided in Cuba, in the U.S. for the Reds, and made their debut on Independence Day, July 4th, 1911. So just love that part of the story there. Now, after Marsans and Almeida, more Latin players did come to the league slowly. And let's talk about just a couple. We'll leave some folks out for length of the video, but just a couple more I wanted to highlight of cards I actually do have, which I've been excited to pick up here most recently. So let's talk about this guy. This is Cuban pitcher Adolfo or Dolph Luque. Dolph Luque made his debut 3 years after Marsans and Almeida and played over 20 years from 1914 to 1935. He is called by some the first true Latin American star and ended his majors career with 194 wins versus 179 losses, and played with Cincinnati in the 1910s, among other teams too. He had an amazing 1923 season with a 1.93 ERA and led all pitchers that year with a 27-8 win-loss record and the 1.93 ERA. And I want to show the back of this card too. So a very beautiful picture of Dolph Luque in the back half of his career, near the end of his retirement actually, in the mid-30s. 1933 Gaudi card here. Let me show you the back. Well, first off, remember what the front looks like. You got the hat, the red brim, the red, lines, embroidery on his jersey, the face right there in the middle, and Adolfo Luque at the top. If you remember that, you can see The back, like the leaf and some Bowman issues too in late 40s baseball and football cards, there's a wet transfer. I saw this on the eBay listing, snapped it up as fast as I could based on a price I offered too. But love, you can see his last name at the top, kind of the transfer of the ink there, his red cap, the outline of his body a little bit, and then those red embroideries. And so on the back of this card, there's not just that, but also some really cool facts about Adolfo Luque, the only Cuban now playing in the National League, born Havana in 1890, talks about some early playing time with the Braves, came back to Cincinnati 1918, Brooklyn, signed with the Giants in 1932, 5'10", 172, and again refers to his best year in 1923. He went 27-8. Last year as a relief pitcher for the Giants, won 6 and lost 7. Just love that. Lots of meaning on the back of that card. So that is one of the first early, if not the first earliest, Latin American star pitcher, Dolph Luque, 1933 Gaudi. Last up, and a card I just got actually today, maybe yesterday I got it in the mail, but a guy I've heard a few guys talk about because he played and was a coach on other teams. And so this may be, you may remember this guy from other channels, and other guys who are St. Louis Cardinals fans will probably know this guy more than I would have before, but this is Miguel Gonzalez. This is his 1940 play ball. So Mike Gonzalez was born in Havana, Cuba, and he was a catcher throughout his 20-year career, 1912 to 1932. Played for Cincinnati just 1 year in 1914, so that's my tie back to the Reds organization with Mike Gonzalez, 1 year in 1914, with many other clubs as well, including my Chicago Cubs, and did see some playoff and World Series time with various teams. Now, he was an interim coach on the 1934 St. Louis Cardinals Gas House Gang team, and in 1938 became the first Latin American to manage in the major leagues. So another accomplishment right there. There's lots of interesting stories about Mike Gonzalez on the SABR article I'm going to link to. I couldn't put them all in this video, but definitely check that link out if you're curious. And he was inducted, like Marsans and Almeida, into the Cuban Baseball Hall of Fame in 1956. This is my first play ball card. This would have been after he was a player, but he had been coaching, I suppose, at this time too. The back of the card, you can see it talks about born in Havana, Cuba, one of the smartest catchers in baseball for many years. He lives baseball all year round. When he is through for the season with the St. Louis Cardinals, Mike returns to his native Cuba, where he manages a league team. Mike's pet expression used to be, "He good, field, no hit." I did see some articles about that written up and kind of what that meant. Again, talks about his days with the Giants, the Cubs. He made an unassisted double play against Philadelphia in 1915, a rare and outstanding feat, as a catcher, of course. And again, alludes to his coaching days with the Cardinals since 1934. And in 38, late in the season, he managed the club. So very cool. It highlights that barrier breaking he did as well in 1938. 6'1", 200 pounds. Catcher for about 20 years in the majors. So I want to show that card off as well. A guy I didn't know anything about before probably a couple months ago, but I've loved learning about him. I picked up this card off of, I think it was eBay recently too, and it'll be a memory for me in my collection to highlight what I've learned and what I appreciate a bit more than I did before about some of these players. So those are the 4 players. Many Cubans came, up until from 1908, 1911 to the 1950s. I highlighted a lot of Cuban players on the Washington Senators team in the 1950s in a prior video I'll link to as well. And Clark Griffith was a common thread, bringing Cuban ball players and talent to the Reds, and then coming to the Washington club in the later mid-half of the 20th century, and bringing Cuban players to Washington as well in the 1950s. So he was a common thread, it appears, throughout these more Cuban players coming into the majors. So, but one more thing I want to show. It's going to be a picture I'm going to paste into this video. There's one more card I want to get. I don't have this card yet. So you'll see a video or a picture of it here pretty soon here. It's a 1913 Fatima T200 team card of the Reds. Not a Reds fan, nothing wrong with that, but this This 1913 Fatima T200 shows both Almeida and Marsans as members of the Reds, which is so ultra cool to me that these two players, to be early Cuban ball players, are on a Fatima team card of the Reds. There's also a handful of ex-Chicago Cubs players from their dynasty of the early 1900s on this card as well, which I think is really cool. Mordecai Brown, Jimmy Shecker, Johnny Kling, others are on this team and went to the Reds after the Cubs. So it's going to kind of fill a couple different kind of niches for me on what I collect. So have my eyes open for that card on eBay, other methods. We'll pick it up hopefully at some point to kind of go with this collection and my Cubs collection too, frankly. So that's it. Hopefully you've survived the 20-minute video. Appreciate you watching all the way through. Really love doing this research. Let me know in the comments if you know something about these players I missed. Maybe there's another Cuban ball player that I could highlight at some other time, right? Or talk about, or a card I could pick up of someone else that maybe was in those first kind of 20 years of the 20th century I may not know much about, or has a card out there that'd be interesting to pick up. Let me know. Love your comments. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it, guys. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.